Hey everyone, my name is Shanice and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with part 2 in my series of recommending books based on Beatles albums, and in this video I will be giving you guys book recommendations based on each of the songs on album 2 in the Beatles discography, and that album is called very conveniently With the Beatles. And it was released on November 22nd, 1963, just 8 months after their first album, Please Please Me, was released. It was once again produced by George Martin and has 14 tracks on it, 8 of which were original compositions, 7 of those were co-authored by Paul McCartney and John Lennon. One of those was George Harrison's first solo feature on a Beatles album, and then the other 6 were cover songs. Unlike Please Please Me, which was recorded I think in around 12 hours, this second album was recorded in 7 sessions across 3 months. And the album cover for With the Beatles is now extremely famous and has been copied by other bands too. And the photograph was taken by Robert Freeman, who would also take pictures for the Beatles' other albums. Okay, so once again, I have 14 songs slash books to get through, so I'm gonna just start right away. And also, just to let you know, I have taken, my liberties and have tried to approach the recommendations a bit creatively, even more creatively this time around than last time, because, the themes of the songs could be kind of repetitive. So instead of giving the very on-the-nose kinds of recommendations, I try to spice it up a bit and give recommendations based on like loose themes, or kind of give recommendations that are responses to the song. So you'll see in a second. But yeah, let's just get right into it. So track 1 is called It Won't Be Long, and it was sung by John Lennon. It is about a guy who is very sad. All he's been doing is crying, and he's been totally alone since he broke up with his girlfriend, or she broke up with him, and he has sort of convinced himself that she's gonna come back, and it's only a matter of moments before she does so, and that they'll be together and happy once she takes him back. But the whole song just sounds like a fantasy, like he's sort of deceived himself into thinking this probably is never going to happen, but there's an element of delusion in the lyrics and also a sense of desperation. So I thought that the perfect book recommendation is My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, which was published in 2018. I've spoken about this one on my channel a couple of times already. I absolutely love this book. I gave it a reread this year, and I think it fits really well with this first track on the album, because the 2 couples in question that fit with this song are the narrator and her ex-boyfriend Trevor, and Riva, who, according to Riva, is the narrator's best friend, but according to the narrator, she pretty much hates Riva. But Riva and her relationship with her boss, who is married. And so both the narrator and Riva are a bit delusional in that they think that, in the narrator's perspective, Trevor's just gonna come back to her. She sort of stalks him throughout the entire novel, bombarding him with voicemails and just trying to get him back, even though he's moved on and is in another relationship. And then Riva just thinks that her boss is gonna leave his wife for her. But that delusion, it comes from a place of extreme sadness and depression, which you can sort of tell is in the song too. So yeah, I just think that My Year of Rest and Relaxation fits really well with the first song, and also, I'm never gonna stop talking about this book. It's definitely one of my favorites of this year. Track 2 is also sung by John Lennon and is called All I Got to Do, and it's about a guy singing once again to his significant other about how whenever he wants her, all he has to do is just give her a phone call, whisper in her ear, and she drops everything and goes to him, and vice versa. So it presents a very almost unrealistic relationship where there's predictability and they seem to be ride or die, and it's a perfect relationship. So the book recommendation that I've chosen is one that kind of is the opposite of that. It speaks to that. It's a response to it. It's the anti-predictability or anti expectation sort of novel. And it's a recent release by Jessamine Chan, and it's called The School for Good Mothers. So like I said, this book is more a response of the concept of like what we're supposed to do in a certain role. The song speaks to what like a perfect boyfriend and girlfriend would do for each other in a world where they like literally have no responsibilities and can just drop whatever they're doing and go to the other person. And so this book speaks to the concept of, you know, what a perfect mother is supposed to be, what a good mother is supposed to be, how parenting, there's not like a one size fits all for what a good parent is supposed to be, that everyone is flawed. Frida is the protagonist in this novel, and she's overworked, she's recently divorced, she's just going through a really rough time, and one night she just wants to get some coffee. She leaves her infant in the house just to go run for her coffee. Unfortunately, though, the child is crying, and so the police is called, and from that moment, Frida is seen as a really terrible mother, and she gets sent to this correctional facility for bad mothers, and it's a place where they are taught how to be good mothers. So yeah, this book is kind of like a response to the song that, okay, yeah, that sounds all nice, but this is how real humans behave, and these are the circumstances that might make this sort of perfect relationship falter and complicated. It's a sort of lightly speculative type of book that's not quite horror, but really does speak to our society and the times. So yeah, it's a really excellent book, so definitely check that one out. Track 3 is called All My Loving, and it was sung by Paul McCartney, and this is one of 2 letter songs. The Beatles really like their letter songs. Paul sings about how he promises to write this other person, his girlfriend, every single day about how he loves her while he's away, that he will stay faithful, that he loves her, that he's always thinking about her. So for this one, I want to recommend The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and this one was published in 1982, and the relationship that connects this recommendation to the song is not a romantic one, but a sister relationship. And so that's between Celie, the protagonist, and her sister Nettie. And Nettie, at one point in the story, leaves. She goes far away. I'm not going to say where because I don't want to totally spoil the book, but she promises to, or they promise to write each other. And as we read on, we realize that, you know, outside forces have been intervening in their relationship and have prevented the letters from getting to the other person. Not going to say anything else, but yeah, we do see that in these letters, you know, they're very honest with each other about the people that they like, what they're going through in their lives, and I think it explores sisterly bonds just really beautifully, and just an excuse to recommend The Color Purple, which I've not talked about on my channel yet, and the movie. I do recommend the movie. It's excellent. Track 4 is called Don't Bother Me, and it was written and sung by George Harrison. This is his one solo contribution to the album. And so in typical George fashion, it's a very introspective type of song. It is about a guy. There's a lot of like breakup songs on this album, but yeah, so a guy has just been broken up with, and he's very depressed. He has basically self-isolated. It seems like other people in his life, like his friends, his loved ones, are trying to reach out to him to get him to talk to them about it, but he doesn't want to talk to anybody. He doesn't want anyone to bother him. He's just going to be alone in his room thinking about this and what he's done and what has transpired, kind of self-deprecating. And sonically, it's always sounded to me like Somewhere They Can't Find Me by Simon and Garfunkel, which came, you know, after this song, but I feel like there's some like sonic similarities there. But anyway, that's not the point of this video. The book I will recommend, while My Year of Rest and Relaxation would fit nicely with this one, I am actually going to recommend A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and this was published in 2015. Maybe you have read this already like everybody else on the planet. The part in question in the book that reminded me of this song, I don't want to give away because it is definitely a climax of the book, but let's just say that one of the final tragedies strikes Jude, the protagonist. Something happens to a very cherished person in his life. All I'm saying, but I'm pretty sure you already know what I'm talking about. Jude essentially isolates himself. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He basically does exactly what the singer of the song mentions in the lyrics. He doesn't want help. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. He just wants to be by himself. So yeah, it's a very sad, but I think very good recommendation to make for a song like this. And like, now that I'm going through the songs on this album, they're all kind of cynical and sad, at least compared to the first one. Track 5 is called Little Child, and it is sung by John and Paul. Paul later on called this song a filler song along with a few others, and it's when you listen to it, it's kind of obvious. It is still a fun song, but definitely maybe not the most lyrically substantial in the album. But yeah, basically it's about a guy asking a girl to give him a chance because he wants to dance with her. He wants them to get together. And he's kind of in a patronizing way calling her child. She is the little child, and her being with him is gonna take away his sadness and his loneliness. So the book that I'm recommending is called Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, which was published in 2019. It is about a 28-year-old named Lillian whose former best friend's new husband's 2 kids need taking care of because they randomly self-combust, which is a bit of a metaphor for their mental health and what they're going through in their lives, because they're going through a lot in their home life with their father and their new stepmom and all of that. So Lillian goes in to babysit these 2 kids, and the whole book is basically her trying to get them to open up to her, to give her a chance, and in that she and the kids sort of help each other in their own struggles. So this is one of those creative interpretations I've had of the song, just because if I took a more literal approach, I feel like every recommendation would be the same, because it's, about love, about telling someone that they love them, about dancing, So little child, Lillian taking care of little kids, they want to give each other a chance, they want to open up, they want to stop feeling sad and lonely by befriending each other. So it fits in its own way, and anyways, it's a really great book, really heartwarming, really accessible, but has a lot of like deep lessons and themes. So track 6 is the first cover song on the album and is called Till There Was You. It was originally written by Meredith Willson and is actually a song from the musical The Music Man, but here by the Beatles it is sung by Paul McCartney, and it has a more of a classical guitar approach to it, very traditional ballad style. Keeping that in mind, I chose to recommend The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, and it's an epistolary novel published in 1774, so I'm really taking it back. The lyrics of the song speak about a person who has never known love, or has never really heard the birds sing, and has never really seen the sweetness of life until they met this one person that they're absolutely in love with. And this sort of melodrama matches what happens in the book, which tells the tale of Werther, who is a very, very sensitive young artist who shares his story with his friend Wilhelm via letters. That's why it's an epistolary novel. And in these letters, he tells Wilhelm about his new infatuation with this girl named Charlotte, who he is madly captivated by. However, Charlotte is in love with this other guy named Albert. So Werther is just agonizing about this love triangle, and this love for Charlotte that's obviously never going to lead anywhere because she's already promised to somebody else. Both the song and the book have a pastoral quality. There's a lot of talk of nature and country life and the landscape, birds and the flowers and all of that. And again, it's very melodramatic, very romantic, very classic and traditional. So yeah, it fits in nicely with the lyrics of the song, and it's very short. I remember I had to read this for one of my undergraduate classes, and yes, it's sad, but I think it's a very beautiful and memorable tale. So yes, The Sorrows of Young Werther for Till There Was You. Track 7 is another cover song called Please Mr. Postman, which was originally performed in 1961 by the Marvelettes, and was written by, and I have to look down for this because there are quite a few writers, originally written by Georgia Dobbins, William Garrett, Freddie Gorman, Brian Holland, and Robert Bateman. And in the Beatles version, it is sung by John Lennon. This one is pretty self-explanatory. It is about somebody going up to the mail person and begging them to check if they have a letter from the singer's significant other, because they've been waiting for it and it hasn't come yet, and they're getting more worried and more frustrated, and they're very desperate to get this letter. And I could think of no other book at this moment in time than Either Or by Elif Batuman, which was released earlier this year. Poor Celine and her good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend, I guess, Ivan. Selin is once again just waiting for some sort of communication from him. This case not through physical mail, but through emails. And for a lot of this book, at least the first half or so, she's just trying to communicate with him. He does respond, but not in full emails, just like weird, cryptic one-liners, and it's driving her crazy, and she's sort of obsessed with checking her email because of this, and she just wants to know what's up with the relationship. There is just a lot of impatience in both Either Or and also this song. And you might say that I'm reaching with this next bit of info, but the fact that, you know, a cover in itself is sort of like a redo or a continuation of the original song. Also, Either Or is a sequel to The Idiot, so another connection. Track 8 is yet another cover song. It is Roll Over Beethoven, originally performed and written by Chuck Berry, and in the Beatles version it was sung by George Harrison. The lyrics for this one are sort of funny. So it's about a singer who is into rock and roll and rhythm and blues, and he's basically directing his lyrics to Beethoven, telling him to move over and make room for the new type of music that he wants to sing and that it seems like modern society wants to sing. Like classical music, tradition, like out of the way, this new style is coming through and we want to be seen and heard. It is speaking to like the divide between modern music at the time and classical music that's maybe seen as more like sophisticated and more elevated. And so I picked a book that is also toying with this idea of maybe more experimental forms of literature versus more traditional storytelling. So I chose The Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book is definitely not for everybody. It was published in 1995 and is about a classical concert pianist named Ryder, who goes to this unnamed Central European country to perform his like biggest concert of his life. It's very important for his career. However, he seems to have a bunch of appointments and errands to make and to go to, but he like doesn't know why or where. He keeps forgetting about them, and it's very experimental, very sort of stream of consciousness, surreal. You kind of don't know what's happening most of the time. Neither does Ryder. So this book definitely caused an uproar in the literary community, with a lot of people hating on it because of, I guess, its unreadability. It is very confusing, very long too for such an experimental work. In a way, you can say like the critical response to this was similar to the critical response to something like rock and roll and rhythm and blues getting popularity when classical music was maybe losing its popularity. And it was like Kazuo Ishiguro's way of just giving himself the right to write whatever he wanted to, like move over critics. I'm gonna pave my own path. If I want to write an experimental novel, so be it. I really don't care what you guys have to say. I have a right to do this. So yeah, it has that assertive voice that Chuck Berry did when he originally sang Roll Over Beethoven. Kind of tradition, move aside, something new is coming through. Definitely not for everyone. Maybe not Ishiguro's best, not my favorite Ishiguro, but I think still worth reading. Track number 9 is admittedly not my favorite Beatles song at all, definitely not my favorite on this album. It's called Hold Me Tight, and it was sung by Paul McCartney. It is about love. It is about two people who really love each other being together and like appreciating each other. The lyrics make it sound like they're almost soulmates. They're meant to be. The love is great and it's grand. And so with that in mind, I chose one of my favorite books from 2021. It's called My Heart. It was translated from the Bosnian by Celia Hawksworth and written by Zemetsdin Mehmedinovic. I hope I'm saying that right. This is in the style of autofiction. It is beautiful and heartbreaking, very powerful and insightful. It is broken into 3 parts. The first part talks about the real life heart attack that the author went through, and so it kind of talks about what happened to him. The second part focuses on this road trip that he took with his son in the United States, and then the third part is about the author's wife who has a heart attack. The whole book is this affirmation of love, of cherishing it, of not taking it for granted, especially right after tragedy. And a series of tragedies for this family. It's about like the quiet, tender moments that Zemetsdin and his wife and his son have, and how they kind of appreciate each other more because of their circumstances and because of how close they were to losing each other. So yeah, this is definitely like an affirmation of love, and one of the best books I've ever read. Definitely the best of 2021. Highly recommend it. If you haven't read it yet, grab a copy. It was published by Catapult, one of my favorite imprints. So yeah, one thing you take away from this video, go read My Heart. Track number 10 is a cover song. It is called You Really Got a Hold on Me, originally performed and written by Smokey Robinson. It is about someone singing to another person that they both love but like don't really want to be around. They like them but they sometimes don't. It speaks to how they just can't get away from them even though they want to. There's like a push and a pull. There's something tantalizing about this relationship and bond that they have with this significant other. They're like under their spell. And so I'm recommending one of my favorite novels ever. It's called Passing by Nella Larson, published in 1929. I think by this point, because of the other book, The Vanishing Half, by Britt Bennett, Passing has sort of had a resurgence on BookTube, at least, or in the reading community at large. Why this book fits the song? One of the characters, Irene, she used to be best friends with this girl, Claire, whereas Claire has decided to pass as white to, you know, avoid the extreme discrimination that anybody of color would have at that time. Irene has chosen otherwise, so she is a woman of color and identifies as such. And so there's been a long time since they both have been close to each other and been friends, but one day randomly they cross paths, and from that point Irene realizes that even though she wants to sort of avoid reuniting with Claire because of the whole passing thing and how she feels like Claire is betraying her race, and because of just the problems and the tension that exists there, she like wants to avoid Claire, but she finds that she can't. She's just drawn to her beauty, to her story, to how complicated it is. There's a curiosity there, and she's like spellbound by her friend, and she wants to protect her too. They're like satellites to each other. They're obviously connected because they're both light-skinned, although they've made two very different choices on how to identify. But yeah, they just have this eternal bond, and it's beautifully written, beautifully explored, tragic in the end, but just a very important novel. And I'm really personally excited to check out Nella Larson's other works. I have like the bind-up of her completed works. Just a phenomenal book and one of my personal all-time favorites. Track 11 is called I Want to Be Your Man, and it was sung by Ringo. And like a lot of the songs that ended up being sung by Ringo, this is very fun, very lighthearted, very energetic, and like kind of coquettish, kind of coy. It is what it is. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's Ringo singing about how he wants to be your man. about how he's going to be the best lover, he's going to be just the best time, you have to be with him because he's the best. And so sort of like I did in my last video where my book recommendation was a response and like a cautionary tale for that male perspective, I'm doing the same here. And I am recommending Notes on an Execution. This was published earlier this year and was written by Dania Kukafka, and it tells the story of Ansel, who has about 12 hours to be executed, and he goes through his life and what happened and what he has done, but he does so through the perspectives of the women in his life who he has directly affected. So I like how this book sort of works as the other side of broken promises and betrayals and false hopes, and like breaks down the what happens after the sort of promises that are made in the lyrics of this song, like what men can become after they make these lovely promises. And it touches on like fleeting lust and the dangers of that. Yeah, this book is just really haunting, really effective, and one of my favorites that I've read this year. Keeping in line with this kind of dour mood, track 12 is called Devil in Her Heart, and it was sung by George Harrison, but originally written by Richard Drapkin. And lyrically, this reminded me a lot of Baby It's You from Please Please Me, in that the singer seems to be singing from a place where like his friends and the people around him are telling him that the girl that he likes is bad news, that she's got like a devil in her heart, there's something wrong with her, she's gonna like break up with you and do you wrong. But the singer is like adamant about the fact that they're wrong, he's right, and he's gonna like pursue this person no matter what, because there's like absolutely no way that this person is all of those bad things, because they know them, you know, there's no evidence yet that any of that is gonna happen. They're perfect, they're lovely, like what are the friends even talking about? So it just sounds like the pre-disaster mindset. And so with that, I have recommended In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Definitely the post Devil in Her Heart perspective. It, in the most unique, creative way, tells the story of what happened to Carmen when she was in an abusive relationship. It's hard to explain if you haven't read the book, but yeah, it's told through like different genres, different styles, different voices, all showing us how houses can be keeper of secrets, they can be places of abuse and destruction, and all the different significations that they can have in one's life. So there are like horror elements, and that like place to like the devil part of the title of the song. And the woman in the dream house, who is unnamed in the book, definitely sounds like the character in the song that the friends are trying to warn the singer about. But of course, like no one enters a relationship assuming that that's abuse is going to happen. Kind of terrifying to think about, how like you never know what someone's gonna turn into, even though they don't present themselves initially as like the bad thing, they might end up bad. So if you want a really uniquely told and very beautifully written memoir, then I would definitely say check out In the Dream House. Track 13 is one called Not a Second Time, and it was sung by John Lennon. It's about a guy singing to his ex-girlfriend about how even though she seems to want to get back with him, he doesn't even want to bother with going at this relationship for a second time. So I am reaching with my book recommendation, but I think it's worth it because it's an excellent historical novel. It's called In the Time of the Butterflies by Julia Alvarez. It was published in 1994, and it is a fictionalized account of the Mirabal sisters, the three women who wanted to overthrow the Trujillo regime dictatorship in the Dominican Republic, and their plan to put an end to the dictatorship ultimately ended up with the three of them being murdered by Trujillo. In my recommendation, I really wanted to focus on the idea of wanting the chance to start anew and not wanting to return to the horrible things that had been happening in this relationship. So in the book's case, it's the relationship between like citizen and dictator, and how they didn't want to have a continuation of this dictatorship. They wanted to put an end to it so the country can actually have a democracy and start anew. So yes, I might be reaching, but I don't know. I thought it would be like better than just recommending yet another book about some sort of breakup or like some sort of cliched love romance type of book. So yeah, I think In the Time of the Butterflies is like a unique way of looking at this idea of like not wanting to return to something that was damaging to you, and in this case, an entire country. And so the last song on the album, track 14, is called Money, and in parentheses, That's What I Want. I love this song, kind of my anthem right now. And this is written by Janie Bradford and Berry Gordy, and sung by John Lennon. It's very cheeky, very fun. So it's basically about, you know, someone who really wants money and more money, and you know, he's basically saying like, yeah, you can have your lessons about how love is what's going to bring you true happiness, but like you could tell the birds and the bees that like give me money, and love is nice, but like it doesn't pay my bills. And so keeping those lyrics in mind, I'm going to recommend The New Me by Halle Butler. This was published in 2019 and is a quintessentially millennial novel. The protagonist is a sort of insufferable, misanthropic young woman named Millie. She's actually, I think, 30 years old, which is a nice departure from like the young 20-something-year-old millennial that I feel like a lot of novels are preoccupied with. I like that she is 30 at least, because it kind of like gives a new flavor to the desperation that she feels. So she has a bunch of temp office jobs that are gonna go nowhere. She doesn't like it. She's just in it to get paid. And the whole book is basically her working these deadbeat jobs, trying to just get by. And she's, you know, she complains a lot. She judges people a lot. But I think it's, you know, definitely influenced by her lack of mobility, like how stuck she feels. And yeah, just a sadly very relatable book at this time. But I think like the wry and dark sense of humor matches the very like cynical, cheeky tone of the lyrics of the song, and to me they're both equally funny. Okay, and with that, album 2 with the Beatles is done. I hope you enjoyed all these book recommendations. I'm really trying to include like books I haven't talked about on this channel yet, although sometimes I am inevitably going to have to mention one or two. In this case, Otessa, once again. I will admit that With the Beatles is maybe not my favorite Beatles album, but it still has some really great songs. It's very fun, and I still do enjoy listening to it. It's just, yeah, not my favorite in the entire Beatles discography. However, the next album, A Hard Day's Night, don't know when I'm gonna get to the video. It'll be, you know, a few weeks, but that album is one of my favorites, so cannot wait for that. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!